Hello, and welcome to the University of New Mexico Health Sciences Center Faculty of Color videos. We're eager to share these inspiring stories from our remarkable faculty. As you know, the greatest asset to our institution and any organization is our human capital. In telling these stories, we're celebrating the strength that voices from diverse perspectives bring, both culturally and cognitively. They bring a connection to and an understanding of our diverse communities in New Mexico, so that we can provide the best services and outcomes possible across all of our core mission areas. These stories create a culture of inclusion that harnesses all of the power that a broad spectrum of talents, skills, life experiences, and perspectives bring, so that we can create transformational change across all dimensions of our Health Sciences Center, working toward better health outcomes and greater health equity for all. So please join us as we celebrate the diversity that makes our University of New Mexico Health Sciences the best that it can be.
My name is Cynthia Reyes. I'm a pediatric surgeon. I grew up in New York City. My parents are from Puerto Rico. My dad has an 8th grade education. My mom has a high school equivalency diploma that she obtained after I was born and she was married. So I'm the first to go to college in my family. I went to school on scholarships. My parents obviously could not afford to pay for any of my education.
I grew up being an older person in Salem, Alabama, and this was during the Jim Crow era, and this was before the Civil Rights Movement. So I grew up, went to a one-room school, and we lived on a farm. It was a farming community, very rural. We had no indoor plumbing, no utilities. We used a well. We had an outhouse. My parents actually had an 8th grade education. My father was part of the older group in my family and wanted more of an education, but it was not accessible to him.
My name is Andrea, Freeman Duncan. I go by Andy. I grew up in San Antonio, Texas. Both of my parents grew up in North Texas and big families. No doctors in my family.
Both my parents grew up speaking Spanish as their first language, especially on my mom's side. I've been on the low-income end of our population in the state. I actually received an academic scholarship when I was in high school to come to UNM, and that's how I got started here.
I grew up in Belen, New Mexico, which is a small community. My parents did not go to college. My father was a plumber. My mom was a housewife who sometimes worked at my uncle's cafe. The best decision I ever made was to become a pediatric nurse practitioner. I love what I do. I absolutely love it.
I was born in New Delhi, India. I have a very modest background. My parents were both teachers. If it weren't for my father's stroke, I probably wouldn't have become a doctor. I wouldn't have realized how important it is to join medicine and take care of patients.
For 12 years of my life, I was a caregiver for my mom, because she was sick from the time I was born until the time that she died when I was 12. And I think that in itself prepared me for the careers I've chosen at this point, because both of my careers as a medical technologist and as an acupuncturist or a doctor of oriental medicine, I tried to make people or help people get better.
My father is from Bolivia and my mother is from the States. I grew up in New Jersey, the son of a doctor, but of an immigrant doctor. But it became somewhat of a shock when people would refer to me as a minority or as someone outside the mainstream. That in some ways that there was not an expectation that I would achieve as anybody else would.
Well, my name is Emily Houses, and I am Chiricahua Fort Silapachi, and I'm an assistant professor in the College of Nursing at University of New Mexico. I always knew that I wanted to come home and do work that served my people. And so when I saw that there was this huge disparity in cancer outcomes for Native people, it seemed obvious, it was a no-brainer, that I was going to come home and do work here in New Mexico. This is the best place that I could be to do the kind of work I wanted to do.
I'm native New Mexican, and my mom and dad were both from up north in New Mexico in Taos. So my mom's from Cañon and my dad's from Ranchos, and they both finished high school. I just remember walking into Harvard Yard and through that gate and thinking, I don't know anybody here, and just feeling like really just so lost. It was just a pretty awful feeling. For me, there was never a question that I was going to come back home and actually go to medical school here and actually stay here and actually hopefully be a doctor here for New Mexico, because this was where I came from. This is where I had my support and my connections, and these are the people. If I was going to serve and help anybody, I want to help the people of New Mexico.
My name is Loretta Cordova de Arteaga. I am from New Mexico. I spent the first 10 years of my life in Los Lunas, which is a town 20 miles south of here, and then I spent the rest of my time in Albuquerque. I completed medical school here back in the 80s, and back when I was a student, there were only 4 Hispanic women in my class. Only 2 of us finished. And so I knew that I was certainly a minority in the medical field. So I'm the first department chair who's Hispanic. I was the first Hispanic female promoted to professor at the School of Medicine. I feel like by leading by example and bringing people along is really important, and so I hope that that's what I have to offer.
My name is Raj Shah. I came from India 26 years ago. I come from a agriculture family. We used to, I used to work in the field, with, sugar cans, bananas, peanuts, wheat, rice, and everything. You have to earn the trust of the people, whom you're going to either work with or help with. Let them tell you their story. Listen to them very carefully and see, instead of judging them, instead of stigmatizing them, see how you can help them.
Hi, my name is Patricia Bradley. I am the Native and Distance Services Librarian here at the University of New Mexico Health Sciences Library and Informatics Center. I'm a full-blooded Navajo from northwestern New Mexico. When you look at from my parents' generation, people who grew up in extreme poverty, English not being their first language, and of course, they grew up they came of age during the World War II. They had very few choices. And we took that. The next generation had almost just about. We had choices.
I'm Dr. Renee Ornelas, and my specialty is pediatrics, and I have a subspecialty in child abuse. And my area of expertise is child sexual abuse. We were poor growing up. When I finished high school, my grandmother told me, okay, mija, now we can go down to JCPenney's and you can get a job at JCPenney's and we'll get a discount. Like, she was so excited for me. So I said, Mami, I'm going to go to college. She goes, college? She didn't know what college was. They didn't know.
I was brought up and in a family that had domestic violence. And my mom really struggled with that. She was 16 when she had me. So I came to teach, and I'm thinking, I have that background. I know that about me. And I see these other people that seem like, well, their grandpas were doctors, and their dads are doctors, and or they were pharmacists, or they were someone in the medical field. And who am I? My grandma made it to 6th grade, and my grandpa, I think, to 5th or 4th. When I decided to go to pharmacy school, I told my mom and my grandma, and both of them told me, that is the stupidest idea I've ever heard. You're supposed to stay home. I had a 1-year-old daughter at the time. You're supposed to stay home, and that's what you're supposed to do. And so I talked to my husband about it, and he told me, no, if that's what you want to do, that's what you need to do. And so just hearing that in the back of my mind, it was hurtful. And it made me think, do they think I'm not good enough either? And later, they never meant that. They were just afraid for me because they didn't think that they could do it. And so they thought, well, I don't want her to get hurt. I want to protect her. So many times I see students second guessing themselves just like I did. Well, I'm not good enough. I'm not this and I'm not that, because they're comparing themselves to somebody else. And what I think is so important for not only students but for every human being on this earth, to recognize that they have a role to fill, and that role is unique, and that role is valuable, and that role is beautiful. And it doesn't have to look like somebody else's. In fact, why would you want it to be? Why would you want to sell your role short?
In Dallas, I remember I did my residency at the county hospital. It was very urban. And so there I remember I would, at least on a weekly basis, I'd just be in the elevator and someone would say to me, it was usually a black family, would get in the elevator and they would look at me and say, "What do you do?" And I'd say, "I'm a doctor." And strangers would just say, "I'm so proud of you." And they were. And that's I think the best thing that I can do for people, is to just to show them that you can do anything, you know, and I'm living proof of that.
We hope that you've enjoyed and been inspired by these wonderful stories and can see why diversity is a key to improving the health and well-being of all New Mexicans.